have some questions about the K2
Okay.
because I put it out to my readers and asked if they had any questions that they wanted to ask you.
Yeah.
So the first one is, I think you told me this before, but I want to make sure that there's no way that we can get too much K2. Is that right?
Right. There's no overdose limit for K2. It's called LD50. It's called lethal dose 50. And the way you study it, I mean, of course, you start it in animals, but the way you study it is you take mice and you feed them really high doses of the nutrient, in this case, vitamin K2. We've done it up to 2,000 times the normal human dose. And then you see what dose actually kills the mice. And then once you find the dose that kills the mice, you take half of that dose and you make that the upper limit for humans. But we've done that. We've never seen any dose that actually harms the mice in any way. And so even up to 2,000 times the intake level for humans. So there is no LD50 for vitamin K2. And then we also know empirically that in places like Japan from natto, they've been consuming upwards of 900 micrograms of K27 a day. So there's no impact there. And not only there's no impact, but that's really good for you.
Okay. So another question I had is then how do we know if we're actually deficient in K2? And that way, we're not taking it if we don't need it. And what happens to the extra K2 in our body that we might not need? Is it stored somewhere or passed out of the body?
Yeah, so you can assume that you're deficient in K2 if you're not taking K2, because there's no K2 anywhere in your diet. Even if you're eating grass-fed butter, people say, I eat a lot of grass-fed butter, or I drink emu oil and these things. There's no defined amount of K2 in any of these things. If you're eating high levels of natto, the fermented soybean, then you're okay. Or if you're in parts of Northern Europe where you're eating certain fermented cheeses, you're likely okay. Or if you eat lots of organ meat, then you're likely okay. Outside of that, you're significantly deficient in K2. Studies in the Western population show most people are clinically deficient. And it's probably one of the most important vitamins where we see such widespread clinical deficiency. So everybody needs it. And the extra, really your K2 is stored in the body fairly well. So you build good levels of vitamin K2 in the body and your body will store it because there's so many components in the body that use vitamin K2. You'll almost never have too much where it has to be excreted. It can be stored indefinitely and used when needed.
How did we used to get the K2?
So we used to get it by eating fermented stuff, also by, and specific fermented things that were fermented by spore bacteria. So the richest sources of the K2 come from spore bacteria. We also used to eat a lot of organ meat, and when we used to kill animals, we used to eat the brains, the livers, the kidneys, everything. So we used to get it from all of those sources. And then arguably our need for K2 has gone up quite a bit. K2 plays a really important role in the mitochondria of the cells. We have lots of toxic stuff around us that kills the mitochondria. So we have more cellular regeneration. So we need more K2 for that. K2 is really important for the health of the neurons, for maintaining the function of neurons. And we have all these neurotoxic chemicals all around us. So not only did we used to likely get adequate amounts through consuming things that were spoiled by bacteria, by eating organ meats and eating brains and things like that, but we also needed less K2, because of the toxicity in the world.
Okay, that makes sense. And when we take K2, we need to take it with food, correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, it absorbs better with fat, so always take it with some food.
With fat, okay. And obviously, I'm guessing saturated fat is best because saturated fat is best for everything, right?
Yeah, and any kind of fat really, but saturated fat is totally fine, yeah.
Okay. And someone asked, we know that the K2 helps with osteoporosis and preventing kidney or gallstones and heart disease because it tells the calcium where to go in the body and not to go in those places, but to go to the bone. Someone was asking if it could also help with bone spurs, with Alzheimer's in some way, and tooth tartar. Is that calcium? Is the
Tartar is not. So it does help in the teeth. I mean, that was the whole basis of Weston A. Price's work, right? So it helps with
Yes,
the
you're right.
formation of the jaw, and it helps with the bones in the teeth. That really
Activator X stuff, yeah.
yeah, that anchor your teeth into your mouth. So it is significant in terms of tooth health, because when you end up with periodontal disease, it means that you're eating away at the bones in your mouth. It starts with gingivitis and gum disease and then goes to periodontal, but K2 helps prevent that periodontal decay in the mouth.
But not tartar necessarily, probably, right?
Not tartar, no. Tartar
Okay.
being a surface,
Right.
superficial thing, and
Okay.
that's really just a cleanliness effect. Now, bone spurs, there isn't any data on bone spurs. I've not seen a K2 study on it. Theoretically, it could, but we couldn't be confident in that. But when the other question about Alzheimer's, I
Yeah.
think it can certainly play a significant role. So one of the things we see is that K2 is really important for the brain. The highest concentration of vitamin K2 in your body is in your brain. And your brain actually has specific transport mechanisms to bring K2 to the brain. So it clearly plays a really important role in the brain. And more than likely, it plays a role in the mitochondria of the brain cells. So the ability to regenerate brain cells and produce enough energy in the brain to conduct all its functions. So it could help with neurodegenerative conditions. So there are studies in a Parkinson's model showing that vitamin K2 can actually reverse the neurodegeneration associated with Parkinson's. And Parkinson's and Alzheimer's have similar kind of neurodegeneration properties. There are studies, we've done studies on neuropathy. So these are neurodegeneration conditions that affect the periphery. We see vitamin K2 can significantly help with that. And so it probably plays a role, but there isn't a K2 Alzheimer's study. It's important to note that.
You guys should
But
do one.
I know we should. We've been looking at a couple of different Alzheimer's studies because the spores play a big role in Alzheimer's, because we now know
Right.
that leaky gut is the biggest driver of Alzheimer's. So it's a hard population to do a study in. They're
Right.
actively managed. There are a lot of risk factors surrounding people who have Alzheimer's. So it's really hard to get the approvals and all that to do studies, but we're working on it.
Okay. All right. I have another one for you that I thought was kind of odd, but maybe you've heard of it. Someone on the other video said that when they started taking the K2, which we know is MK7, and there's a whole video about why, he said that his blood pressure went up. Have you heard of that?
There's no mechanism around why blood pressure would go up with the MK7. There's probably other factors. In fact, there are some mechanisms to show that vitamin K2 will likely reduce blood pressure. So that person should go get other things tested and make sure they're okay.
Okay. All right. My last question. Someone asked, so we know that when we take vitamin D, we definitely need to be taking K2, and same with calcium, but we shouldn't be taking calcium, which we covered in the other video, which I will link to. People are asking, what if, if you're taking K2, does that increase your need for vitamin D? The other way around.
No. Yeah, it's really the other way around. So far, what we know about vitamin D, vitamin K2 mechanisms is that K2 is the final step. So if you're increasing vitamin D intake, you're increasing the expression of all of these proteins that need vitamin K2 to express them. And that's how vitamin D increases the need for vitamin K2. And so, but when you take high amounts of vitamin K2, it doesn't cause any increase of things that vitamin D has to do. So think about it that way. There's a downstream process, right? So vitamin D is behind vitamin K2 in the downstream process in many conditions. And so when you increase vitamin D, you're making more work for K2. But when you increase vitamin K2, you're already at the end point. So you're not reversing, you're not putting backwards work for vitamin D.
Right. Remind me, what are the cofactors that are in the K2? Remind me, is it magnesium?
It's magnesium and zinc, and then K1 as well. So magnesium, zinc, and K1. The reason K1 is important is K1 is that form of vitamin K that works in the liver and works in the clotting cascade. And what's been shown is that if your body doesn't have adequate K1, it might hold on to the K2 in the liver and not release it to the rest of the body. And so we put just the RDA amount of K1 so that all of the K2 that you absorb will be released into the circulation.
And what about the other two, the zinc and the magnesium? Is it just because it helps the K2 be better absorbed as well?
Those are cofactors. So they're coenzymes for a lot of the K2 enzymatic reactions. Minerals play a very important role as cofactors in all of these enzymatic reactions that go on in the body. And it just so happens that magnesium and zinc play a cofactor role in lots of the K2 reactions.
Okay. So again, kind of the other, we were asking about the vitamin D and the role. So K2 doesn't mean that you need more magnesium in your body or vice versa, correct?
Not necessarily. I mean, the amount we put in there gives you enough adequate amounts of magnesium to make sure you're able to utilize all of the K2. But most people get a good amount of magnesium. The one that a lot of people tend to be deficient in is zinc. But there's a lot of magnesium supplementation out there anyway. So we put just enough in to know that we're covering the K2 function, and they wouldn't need to take any additional magnesium beyond that.
Unless they're deficient for other reasons.
Unless they're working other things like, gut motility or brain stuff and all that. That's a different story.
Right.
So we put just enough in there to cover the K2 functions.
Okay. That was all my K2 questions for now. I may have more another day, but that's it for now. Thank you so much.
Okay. You're welcome.